Times like these, we all need a little more George in our life. Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Thank you for being here. Hope you've got your coffee or your beverage of choice. And asparagus membership. Thank you very much there. Add that to broadcast and give you an official thank you. And I think I've got this sorted out, so it shouldn't be zooming all over the screen again like it was before. So let's see. Hey, Jay Emilio, good to see you. And asparagus membership. AB165 bassman with the 500 picofarad coupling cap bass channel mod. Highs are great, but bass frequency is now very anemic, and bass control does nothing. Problem is in bass channel only. Any ideas? It's possible that you have a bad 500 picofarad coupling cap, and so you have it's shunting everything around the plate resistor. So remove the 500 picofarad, see if your sound comes back. It's also possible that in the process of heating that stuff up to move the taking out the 10 nanofarad cap and putting in the 500 picofarad, that just from the heat, the slope resistor, the 100K, that separates the treble part of the tone stack from the mid and bass parts, that resistor could have gone south. So those are the things I would check. But first, just lift out that 500 picofarad. If your sound comes back, it was a bad 500 picofarad, and in the process of moving it from one channel to the other, you got an internal crack or something. Probably not anything major. Sorry, it scrolled on me again. I thought I was turning off asparagus, but I was turning on Rocket Maths. Hey, Rocket Maths. Do I have much of an opinion on the thin plastic 69 Fender wiring? Reliability okay? Mine seems very brittle and stiff, and the stuff for the heaters seems to narrow thinner than 22. Usually it's fine. It is very thin. I think they got maybe some bulk wire from a telecom. You know, it looks like the cabling used by Bell Labs at the time. AT&T, Ma Bell. But it's fine, usually. Now, it's possible that yours, the plastic, has degraded to the point where it's too brittle and it's not insulating anymore. But usually they're just fine, and I don't mind it, or I've never found any systemic problems with it. The heater wiring is 22 gauge. It just has very, very narrow insulation, so it looks like 26 or 24. But I've never had a heater failure caused by the wire. I've had heater failures in 69 Deluxes and stuff, but that was a tube or some other issue. It was not the wiring directly. And I keep clicking on the wrong damn things. Hey, Michael Hellu. What is the American sound as opposed to the British sound when it comes to speakers and amps? Also, is the tweed sound really different from the blackface sound? Way too much is made of the American sound versus the British sound. In general, Celestians are primarily what people are referring to as the British sound for speakers, have a bit more mid-range prominence, and the American sound, which is usually a Jensen, like a C12N, has a little bit more of a mid-range scoop. You certainly find that with Electro Voice or a JBL. You don't actually find that with a Pyle or Utah or Oxford, which tend to be pretty mid-rangey. So way too much is made of American versus British sounds. It's a shorthand that doesn't mean much. As to blackface sound versus the tweed sound, it depends on which blackface and which tweed. The Princeton and Princeton Reverb from 64 and later aren't that dissimilar from the tweed sound if you were to disconnect the negative feedback. Other amps, such as the Twin Reverb, the 57 Twin and the 64 Twin, are entirely different beasts. In general, the blackface amps have much higher headroom, much cleaner output, and a much less crude tone stack. So you have tone controls which give you a lot of variability, whereas the tweeds typically just have, aside from the Bassman and Twin and a few others, just have a tone circuit which either boosts highs if the volume is relatively low, or cuts highs. But you know, by the time you get to the 58 Bassman and the low power Twin, you begin to get a full tone stack. But that tone stack behaves differently and sounds differently to the tone stack that came out on the AB763, the blackface amps. That's why we need to have one of each, right? That's what we tell ourselves. Hey, Scott from Baltimore. I have no idea how to get a Celtic Frost tone because I don't know what Celtic Frost sounds like. So I'm the wrong person to ask. Sorry. That's the biggest compliment I think anyone could ever give someone, making South California traffic bearable. I don't know how I managed, but glad to do my part. Haven't changed the clocks yet. Well, good early evening to you, Martin. You can still have a weed dram if you wish. Sorry, I've been watching a show set in Scotland, so I almost did the bad accent, but I won't subject you to that. The weather is beautiful here, Joshua, today, but Monday it's getting really yucky again. Sorry for not having a stream last Saturday. Speaking of which, we had massive thunderstorms coming through, and our entire neighborhood lost both electricity and internet for many hours, so there was no live stream possibility. Instead, we went to a museum. On the AC10 hand wire, did I try using shielded cable to cut down on the signal noise from the effects loop? Yeah, Mike, I put up a follow-up video on that where I showed that, and it did remove the hum. The stock lead dress was just criminally noisy, and I did that as a Hail Mary, and it did indeed remove all that hum. But that's up on the channel. It's been up there a few weeks. Just out of curiosity, who are my favorite guitar players? You're guessing George Harrison is on my list. Yeah, absolutely. He's one of my absolute favorites. George Harrison, and John and Paul. Paul was did some monster guitar work with the Beatles. So all three of them Beatles. The guitar players who've meant the most to me over time: the Beatles, Hendrix, Stevie Ray, David Gilmore, Andy Summers, Peter Buck, The Edge up to about 1987, 88. I'm a big fan of Robert Smith from The Cure. I love can't think of his name right now. Nick Drake. I love a lot of Jimmy Page's work, an awful lot of Jimmy Page's work. I don't care about hearing a whole lot of Love Again, but that, he did interesting things too. Let's see, who else to throw out there that I haven't mentioned? Alex Lifeson. I should certainly mention Alex Lifeson if I have not already. I find a lot of similarities between Alex Lifeson and Andy Summers. Johnny Marr, not so much, though I do like Johnny Marr a lot. Some of the Smith stuff doesn't work for me. I'm a huge fan of Elliot Easton. He is one of the true unsung heroes, just one of the most underappreciated creative lead guitarists. I wish I could, one of the things about Elliot Easton is that I cannot play his parts on YouTube. I cannot even refer to his parts on YouTube because I will get a copyright strike like that. The Cars are one of those bands that do not want their music to be kept alive for some reason. The Cars, Eagles, I don't like the Eagles very much, but the Cars, Eagles, Bryan Adams, for some reason, you cannot play a Bryan Adams riff without getting your video struck. Keith Scott, fantastic. And in fact, I spoke to Keith not that long ago about some amp work he ended up having done in L.A., which I understand it's a long way from L.A. to Memphis. But it was really nice to be able to speak to him on the phone and thank him for his great work over the years. And bitched at him a little bit because I read an interview in Guitar Player in like 1986 with him, and he said he used like 13s or 14s, and between that and Stevie Ray, I thought I needed to do that, and all I did was hurt my fingers and make my life harder. But it worked for them. But yeah, Keith Scott did a great video on Vertex's channel, Mason's channel, a couple months back, and showing how he played the parts that he wrote and came up with on those records, and they had to take that video down because Bryan Adams' lawyers. So how are kids just, I say kids, people 35 and younger are supposed to discover the Cars and Bryan Adams and even Eagles if they're not on YouTube, because you're not going to necessarily just go to Spotify and say, hey, play stuff my dad likes. But if it gets suggested in your feed, or some younger guitarist discovers it and puts it on their channel and says, well, hey, check out this really cool Elliot Easton riff. Very few people can play My Best Friend's Girl right. And yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. Let's see. Matt Johnson, SC. Thoughts on balancing out the phase inverter in a 5E3 Deluxe besides adding the 470K grid resistor? You read Robin Robinette's page, moving the 100 nanofarad PI cap to the 1.556K junction. You can do that. That'll play around. That'll give you a little bit of tweakability. You can also, here's a real pro tip. Put like a 5K pot. If you really want to play around with this, don't do this in some valuable original, but put a 5K pot between the 1.5K and the 56K and change the 56K to like a 47 or 49.9K resistor. And then you tie the 100 nanofarad. Actually, you could probably change it to a 1.2K and a 53K, and then with a 5K pot, and then put that in there and put the cap on the wiper, and then you could zoop, 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 zoop. Control it. I tend not to do that. I don't think that it's necessary to play around with the balance that much, because you can get it set exactly the way you want it, and the next time you have to change that preamp tube, everything changes. Let's see. I don't know who that Kyle guy is, but I bet he's great. Locally, there's a 1966 C12N SA for $150 with original cone and excellent condiment. Well, I think that's great, because you don't want to have it without any condiments. It'd be dry and kind of tasteless. Original cone may or may not be great. I think original cone is not always a good sign, because it means it's going to have the original voice coil. But good bones. $150 is a good price for that speaker, even if it needs to be reconed. Reconing that thing costs like $80 plus shipping. So it's a really good speaker. Would it be better than my Alessandro in my Deluxe Reverb? That's the real question, because it'd be very similar to your Alessandro. I think that Alessandro's got a bit more prominence in the mids than a true C12N. And I don't know what the SA means for, what stands for. I don't know if the the 12CN SA is different than the the C12N. But the Alessandro is a great sounding speaker, but it's got a bit more of a mid-range focus than most of the C12Ns. I think that the Alessandro sounds like the world's best Oxford. It's mid-range prominent, it's aggressive, and it jumps out at you, and I love that speaker, but I don't think it does the classic C12N thing. Hey, Colby Jack. Hey, Wes. My thoughts on $14 million for Gilmore's Black Parts Caster. Well, I think it probably raised a lot of money for whatever charity Gilmore did that for. I assume he did it for a charity. He didn't need the money himself. I think it's silly to pay that much for some old wood, because that old wood will only did the thing in the previous owner's hands. A. B. The Black Parts Caster that had been changed out so many times over the decade. What configuration was the magic configuration? And they carved it all up for a Kaler and then filled it in. It was a junk guitar with randomly changing necks, randomly changing pickups, randomly changing configurations, played by a truly great player. I think if you could pay $14 million and be able to play like Gilmore, that might be a good investment. For the guitar itself, do I have a preamp tube recommendation for specifically reverb and phase inverter on black panel amps? Hey, Paul Covello. Yeah, right now, Tube Depot has got some really nice Joint Army-Navy Phillips 70s, ECC 81s, 12 AT7s. for like 35, 40 bucks. And those are much better than anything currently made. And they sort them very, very well. And those, they're inexpensive. They're within the same price range as current production stuff. They're much better quality, and I've had excellent, excellent results with them. Maybe I shouldn't tell people that. Maybe I should hoard them all for myself. Hey, Hal Hawkins, what speaker for the Vibro Champ? Well, let's get the rest of the amp going. I want to make sure that a little bit of rattiness is not somewhere else in it because it's got the bad caps. If we need to get a speaker for it, I'll order it because I get a dealer discount on Warehouse, which will become your discount. So don't order the speaker. I'll get the speaker if we need to. And if we need to, we'll get a G8C. I had no idea you were that young, Dustin. Well, you know a lot for a youngin'. You don't come across as a zygote. But I'm glad you know all that music. I knew the music of previous generations, but you have to really be in it and seek it out. And a lot of people, there's so much music over the decades. The people who don't know Bach, but they know every Carpenter's tune, and vice versa. And I think that you should know everything that's good that's ever been done. I think you should have Bach. I think you should have the Carpenters. I think you should have Dizzy Gillespie. I think you should have Led Zeppelin. You should have Black Sabbath. You should have, Richard Thompson. Good music is good music, but it's harder and harder for people to find it unless they already are in a certain genre. And when you can't play the music on YouTube, which is one of the primary ways people get their information, their entertainment, people use it like they used to use TV. It seems like they're shooting themselves in the foot. Hey, Progress Pedals. Hey, Mike, 1649, I am not singling you out. This is just a good opportunity to mention this to everyone else. For those new to the channel, please only ask any one question once, and this is the second time Mike asked the question. I answer them in the order that I see them. I answer almost all of them until the very end of the chat. Sometimes I can't get caught up. But when I see it twice, it makes me think that I scrolled wrong. But yes, I did answer that question earlier in the chat, and that video has been up for a few weeks. Hey, Devin Masters is lame. Poor Devin Masters. Yeah, I have. I can make them for purchase. I even have a PDF on how to use them. Shoot me an email and make SVT PCB the subject, so I'll find it, and I'll be glad to talk to you. As long as you are qualified, because there's a lot involved, and I don't hold all the hands. I don't tell how to install standoffs in the metal chassis, et cetera, et cetera. But the board fits in the space between the existing board and the three can caps and that little metal ridge in there, the little metal divider. It fits right in that space, but you have to disconnect all the wires going to the existing filter caps, bend those leads down, the tabs on the old caps down, and then carefully mark out 4 holes to drill a number 4 screw, which is a 1/8 inch hole. You can use metric standoffs if you want. I guess that'd be like an M3. And then you can put the board right there, and it replaces all that stuff. But yes, I will be glad to talk to you about that. I have not put that up on the channel for sale or on the website because 90% of the people who'd want to order one have no business working on an SVT, let alone making the big changes like that. So if you're really qualified, I will send it to you with the parts list from Mauser as it existed 2 years ago. Some of those parts may have changed. You may have to say, all right, well, that 22 microfarad 450 volt is available anymore. Here's a different one. You gotta know how to do it. I just provide the PCB with a known good layout and overall wiring instructions in terms of, hey, this is where it was on the old one. This is where this wire goes on the new one. Hey, Mr. Anderson. That's my middle name, Mr. My 65 Deluxe Reverb is making noises like wind blowing into the payphone of the person I'm talking to. Does it sound like a preamp tube issue, a 6v6 issue, or neither? Thanks for all I do. Well, thank you. It's most likely a preamp tube. The first thing to do is see if it's on both channels. Is it on your normal channel and your reverb channel? If it is, it's probably in your phase inverter. If it's not in both channels, it's somewhere if it's in the normal channel, it's in V1. If it's in the reverb channel, it's probably in V2 or V4. But it's most likely to be that. It could also be unlikely, but it could be one of the mix resistors, but it's usually an issue with a preamp tube. You could have a noisy plate resistor, but that's not very common in those amps. Hey, JBiz55, what are some things you keep in mind building an MOD Princeton kit? Are there any kit builds I recommend for quality parts to swap? The MOD kit looks really good, and I know that the Mojo Tone kit is really good. They're very comparable kits. As to things to keep in mind, well, yesterday I put up a video of a poorly built kit, Princeton. Look at that, and in the coming week, I'll have another video up on that showing the changes that I'm making to it and why. And I've got many, many examples of actual 60s and 70s Princeton reverbs up on the channel. That should be what you aim for. The only issue, the only variable I don't have knowledge of on the kits, I can see what parts they're sending, the parts are fine, is I don't know what their instructions are like, and I don't have time to ask them for copies of their instructions or download them and read them. So I hope that they're giving you good instructions, because it's possible that that bad kit that I had yesterday was exactly following someone's incorrect instructions. Leo gave us the best instructions already. So look at what Leo did at all times. When did I get involved with fixing amps? Hey, David, when my amp died and I couldn't afford to hire someone like me now to do it, so I just dived in. I dove in. I don't recommend that to anyone. I got lucky, and I turned out to have kind of a knack for it. Amps in current production, which one would I say is the closest in sound to a Gibson EH185? I have to choose one. Well, Heraglop, I don't know what an EH185 sounds like. I know what an EH150 sounds like. As to what sounds kind of like that, man, I don't think anything sounds like that amp today. It's a really percussive, odd sound, due in large part to the field coil on this speaker. It can't do I don't know, what's the best way to put it? It's like the notes jump out, but they jump out slowly. Part of that is because it was paired with hollow bodies in my testing for the most part. But I don't know, there's a very unique character to the EH150, which is a Gibson amp made in '39. That's the Charlie Christian amp, paired with the ES150 guitar. But I don't know the EH185, sorry. As far as the closest thing, I would, if a client said, hey, I've got to have that Charlie Christian tone and I can't afford the original, I would probably have them get a kit, Harvard or 5E3, and have me make a few little changes to it to get it a little bit on the darker side. And the speaker choice would be really the toughest part on that. But the Jupiter, the Jupiter and the regular WGS G12C are very, very close to what an old C12N would sound like when it was new. The Jupiter is a great speaker. It's made by WGS, and just some of the formula is a little bit different. Those are two great choices. Interesting that I mentioned the Alessandro sounds like the world's best Oxford. My 1970s Deluxe Reverb Oxford was the best sounding speaker in that amp after trying a bunch. Just not loud enough. The trick to making a Deluxe Reverb loud enough is get an extension cabinet. So you run that same Deluxe Reverb through its speaker and through another external 12-inch speaker, or through an external 2x12 or 4x12. You'll double the amount of air being moved. You'll have a much louder amp for larger stages, and for smaller stages, you just use the internal speaker. You don't have to replace the Deluxe Reverb. I wish someone could have told me that in 1990 when I traded my old 64 Deluxe Reverb that was not loud enough for the stages I was playing for a JC 120. Hey, Joey Meyer. Let's see, was that the trick? I don't see a follow-up. But if it was just the, oh, so it was the speaker screws and the baffle was loose. There you go. That's the best way to fix it. Start from the beginning. You know, that video I put up yesterday on testing that kit Princeton, from a lot of people's perspective, is going to be really boring because you see me measuring all the voltages and just doing that. In fact, I missed measuring the cathode on the reverb driver because I was thinking about how boring that would be to watch at the time. I remember at the moment filming that thinking, no one's going to watch this. It's so boring. But that's really what we do. If you get an amp in and you want to make sure that it's safe, the first thing you do, or just make sure it's working, the first thing you do is you go through and you do that kind of stuff. Just, all right, power it on with preamp tubes at least. Start with the preamp tubes. Does every preamp tube have a suitable or normal sounding amount of voltage on the plate and the cathode? And, you know, when you're diagnosing a buzz, you start with the really boring basic stuff. Is the speaker on tight? Is the baffle on tight? The baffles are often loose. I don't think I've ever done any amplifier repair that involved any magic or anything that other people could not do if they had approached it in such a way that would lead them to check X, Y, Z. And there are times I miss things and then I'm wondering what the hell's wrong. I'll go for a walk and it'll come to me, or I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, no, I don't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when I'm going to bed. Wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and think, oh yeah, duh, it's that. I'll fix that tomorrow. You know, sometimes our lizard brains take over and it just keeps processing the problem while we're doing other things. And that's better than just staring at the problem for hours. Oscar picked for best film. Well, it might be a little bit late, but I'd say Casablanca. I haven't seen any movies in the theater the past several years. I don't remember what the last movie I saw in the theater was. People talk in the theaters now. We went to a musical a couple weeks ago. It was terrible, by the way. Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. Absolutely terrible musical. Good songs, bad musical. Anyway, it was a present from my wife because she loves Alanis. But and my wife agreed it was terrible. But the people in the theater kept talking to each other loudly and joking. And oh my God, I wanted to kill them. My wife hates public confrontation, so I didn't. But I wanted to, you know, I'll be that guy. I have no hesitation to be that guy. But you don't talk in the theater. And you don't talk in a movie theater either. But I think maybe COVID was the tipping point where people just behave like they're always at home in their living room watching a movie on Netflix or whatever, and they take it to the theater with them, and then they're talking and laughing and checking their phone. And as expensive as going to the theater is these days, I don't want to fuck with it. And most movies that come out bore me. I think maybe the last movie I saw was some Marvel thing I took the kids to. Would I ever consider a series of videos where I would observe somebody working on an amp to guide them, sort of the way a surgeon would? No, I'm not temperamentally suited to that. I would have to just say, never move here. I'll just do it. It's faster for me to do it. I'm impatient. I'm demanding. I cannot explain how to tie shoelaces You just know how to do it or you don't. My best shot at teaching is what I do on this channel, which is, here, watch me do it, and I'll explain as things occur to me. But I'm not anyone's good instructor. Good, and you are so wrong. He says all musics are terrible or adjacent to it. Man, that's some bullshit, man. You just haven't heard good musical. Let's see. Hey, Joachim, you see a 80 Fender Super Champ with the EV 10-inch 4 speaker for a nice price, but I doubt a little because the 6C10 tube, when it needs a retube, these tubes are pretty rare and expensive. Yeah, plus the amp's a piece of crap. The Super Champ from 1980 is terrible. It's the beginning of the end. It is literally the beginning of the end of the great Fenders. And it is, no, don't buy a 1980 Super Champ. I've never built a Mojotone kit, Progress pedals, but I know that the transformers they use work fine with modern wall voltages. But maybe they've got some kits for some Princetons and stuff where there's just a fixed resistor. That's still the value you used in 1964 when that clearly needs to be changed for 2026. So, I do think the transformers. I mean, they're hay-bores. They're fantastic. I don't have any problem with the kit. It's a tricky situation selling kits. That's why I don't want to do any support for those Ampeg boards, because I don't want to hold people's hands and teach them how to do stuff, or have them blame me when they mess it up. And anytime you do the kit thing, you've got to hold everyone's hand. The tech support costs. I don't see how people make money selling those damn things if they actually offer customer support. What question would I ask Leo Fender if I could speak to him today? Well, the thing that, many things I'd like to talk to him about. The thing that bothers me the most is that AB165 basement circuit uses a DC mixer to blend the channels, and each DC in the stock amp is coming from a different filter node, so that DC mixer undoes a lot of the filtering, which makes for a higher noise floor. And that seems such a strange choice for them to make. And also the fact that they give the amp so much gain and then rein it back with local negative feedback, when there have been easier ways to get it where they wanted without introducing the high noise floor that comes from that extra gain stage, even with the local negative feedback. And I'm curious as to how much of that was Leo and how much of that was the beginning of some guy from CBS coming in. I don't know. It came out in 1965, which is the year the sale finalized. But as far as I know, Leo was still involved in the amp design at that period. Maybe that was the beginning of a committee. I don't know. Or maybe it was one of his initial ideas and they had to get something on the market and they rushed it out. But then he left and they never changed it until the next model in 68, 69. That's the one weird thing in all the Fenders from the classic Leo period that just stands out to me, that is a fundamental mistake and a weird design choice. It's the only thing that he ever did that was flat out wrong or not optimal, that he didn't immediately address in the next year's model. Like, you go to the 50s and there'd be like a model out for 6 months and it'd be changed. You know, the 62 to 64, even though the number on the official model number didn't change, the layout was being changed radically. You go from 61 to 62, you have the same model on the market with like 10 different tone stacks, because he was always tweaking and improving. Would it be feasible to make a video on forever amps? Easily serviceable, non-proprietary parts. I hate the idea of buying something that sounds good but can't ever be fixed when it breaks. Yeah, it's on my channel already. It's called Vintage Fenders Playlist. And vintage includes the 80s. And you can even extend that to the 65 reissue series with a little bit of TLC added, which I've also shown in the Fender reissue playlist. There's no proprietary parts. The only proprietary part in any of those Fenders is there's a 3 meg reverse audio pot in the tremolo and a 50K reverse audio pot. And if CTS ever stops making those for whatever reason, that's the only thing that's really could be difficult to source down the road. But so far, CTS keeps cranking those things out. So, you know, it's really hard to go wrong with a Deluxe Reverb or a Vibrolux or a Twin, etc. Let's see. Hey, Cat's Music Journey. Is there any reason why people don't put spring reverb tanks in the head version of an amp besides space constraints? Maybe the interference because it's so close to the transformers. Bingo, you got it. A head is typically this big. And so you got all these transformers hanging down. And if you can squeeze a reverb tank in there, they're right up against the power transformer, and they get noise. To make a head with a reverb tank in it that works, that head's got to be like this tall. Go on Google and search Bandmaster head, and then search Bandmaster reverb head. And that is like the minimum distance you can move a reverb tank to get it suitable. That's why when I recommend people get, if they're going to get it's like the Maz 18R from Dr. Z, the Maz 18 with reverb, get the combo, not the head, because the head version will hum because there's no place for them to put the tank that doesn't hum. In the combo, it's on the floor beneath the speakers. It's that far away from the transformers, and it works fine. Now you'll see like a Marshall JCM 900, which has the tank inside, mounted on the back of the front panel of the head cab, and they get away with it in that case because of a specific tank that they used, and that the reverb level is not very high and the impedances are very different. But it's still not it's not a very hummy reverb, but it's not a very good sounding reverb in a JCM 900. Hey, Papa Hoigs. Pulled the trigger this week on a Swart SDR Tweed. What an incredible amp. Used my old vid for due diligence. You absolutely love the thing. Cheers. I'm glad you enjoy that. That's a nice amp. Thanks, Joey. I'm glad you find my being boring calming. When I started out to doing this, I had no idea that I was going to be apparently ASMR man. Let's see. Be hilarious for me, Brad, and Chris to do a sort of Mystery Science Theater, but with the other text videos. I get to be Crow. Manos, the hands of fate. I don't think the other techs would enjoy it. I think we burn a lot of bridges, but I don't think we should do other text videos. I think we should do guitar reviews and app reviews, especially the product announcement videos from the major company. Imagine Mesa comes up with a video promoting their new Gibson Mesa product, and Brad and Chris and I are watching, doing that to that. That would be fun. Does the devil lose his flavor on the bedpost overnight? B plus winds up hot. I've not found that to be the case with any Haybor Transformers progress. They're taking modern wall voltages on the mains into account. Now, I don't know what they're doing in the kits, but you can mess up all that kind of stuff, even if the transformer is fine. But the Haybor transformers are fine. Tex Roast Mesa, that's a YouTube channel. Well, I've been trying to do it for years now, Wes. But the trouble is you don't need to roast mesas. They're self-roasting. What I think of the prices of the Jim Urs auction, I don't know what that is. Sorry, I don't keep up with the industry stuff. And is that the Gilmore Strat thing? If that's the case, I replied to that earlier. The Super Champ comes with guacamole and sour cream. Yeah, right. It's like we used to have a Supreme Court. Now we find it's just a regular quart with sour cream and tomatoes. Let's see, everyone's saying hello to each other. Other musical numbers, not so much. Man, Little Shop has got some fantastic songs. Little Shop Horrors, Skid Row, Somewhere That's Green, Suddenly Seymour. Man, you may need to get new hearing aids. I will say this: Phantom is a piece of shit. Fuck Andrew Lloyd Webber. He's terrible. But there's good musicals too. I mean, I dare you to go see Guys and Dolls and not have tin horns, a fugue for tin horns stuck in your head for the rest of your life. You got two Carvin SX200 solid state POS amps that you're going to trash. What, if anything, else should you harvest? Man, just take them to see if they're worth anything for scrap at a recycling place. There's nothing in there to reuse. Have I worked on any Tony Bruno amplifiers? And you're not bothering me. That's why I'm here. If you guys weren't quote bothering me, I would be talking to a box by myself, and that's one of the first symptoms. And what do I think about the Bruno cow tippers? I thought I almost read that as the cow slips. Like, well, if you like the Partridge Family, they're great. I've only had a Tony Bruno Vox thing in, whatever that thing was called, and I thought it was not a very good Vox, and it was not a very good Fender. It was somewhere in between. I didn't understand why Vox made that. But I have no opinion of the amps that Tony made himself. I have no experience with them. That'd be that. Okay, well, no, I don't keep up with all that stuff. Man, if I were a billionaire, I would and wanted to be remembered for music instead of collecting the tools of other musicians. Just buy a bunch of instruments for schools and do endowments and stuff like that. So, you get remembered a lot more. I'm not a huge fan of all of West Side Story, but America is so damn good. But you can't dismiss any genre. For every bad thing in a genre, there's something great. And if you just dismiss the genre, you're going to miss out on the bad stuff. Now, there's an awful lot of crappy musicals in the world. Everything Andrew Lloyd Webber has ever done. I don't like Rent. My wife is taking my daughter to see Six, and she was playing some of the tunes from it earlier, and they're crappy. And so then you think, well, current musicals must be bad. Only the classics from the good old days, like My Fair Lady. My Fair Lady is incredible, by the way. But Avenue Q is banging. I don't like Hamilton, but The Heights was fantastic. Yeah, the Jack Nicholson bit was funny. But man, if you vaguely remember the old one, watch the movie version with Steve Martin as the dentist. It's You'll Be a Dentist is worth the price of admission alone. Nothing's wrong with the Partridge Family, but it just reminded me of the Cowsills, which is the real life family band the Partridge Family was based on. Because I misread above. Every time people talk about musicals, I hear Worf groaning, Irving Berlin. Just You Wait, Henry Higgins. Yeah, man. I'm not going to share this on here because it was honest emotion, and YouTube won't monetize my honest emotion. But when we were in Covent Garden on our last trip to London, we got there about 7 a.m. before all the people were here. So I did a FaceTime with my daughter, who grew up watching and loving My Fair Lady, And as I'm panning around Covent Garden, I sing, "Wouldn't It Be Lovely for Her?" All's I want is a room somewhere. And it was great. And I see that stuff, and it takes me back. Let's see, where were we? Why isn't there a decent quad 6v6 with a half power option out there? Because you don't need a quad of 6 L6s. You just get a pair of 6 L6s. And half power out option, just use a little master volume. If you have 4 tubes when you can't have 2 tubes, then you've doubled your chance of something going wrong. Hey, Craig Kaufman. Yeah, that's the thing about doing theater. And the reason I stayed for all of Jagged Little Pill, though the show was terrible, as in terms of the plot and the characters and all the dialogue, and the songs were just jammed in. They're good songs, but just jammed into a musical. I knew, because I've done theater, that cast had been doing that, was living, breathing that for at least 3 months before the night that I saw. And that was what they did there every night and twice on Saturdays, and their entire life was on that. And they weren't making a lot of money, but they were dedicated to it, and they were doing their best with not a very great show. And none of the people on that stage had any role, any vote in what musical was being put on. And from being working actors, they're lucky to get a gig. And so out of respect to them, because they were trying their best, but there was nothing that anyone could have done with that material to save it. And that's one of the reasons I was so mad at the people who kept talking and laughing behind me, because the people on stage could hear those fuckers too. Just disrespectful. Yeah, same subject. Pit musicians don't get to choose the tunes, though I imagine playing bass for Hamilton would be kind of fun. Oh, I imagine so, as far as mixing, because you've got to deal with all kinds of sounds. You got to deal with all varying number of cast members and all the costume changes and mic swaps that can go wrong. The pit, any sound effects. My God, nothing would ever be standing still. I saw some video about lawsuits and body shape rights, and we'll see how it goes. I don't particularly care. I like music. I like things like this that have a different headstock, a different name on the headstock. And if Fender were to make a guitar as good as this again, this company would not need to exist and would not exist. So if Fender wants people to stop using Strat-shaped bodies and Telly-shaped bodies, etc., I think they would be better off making their products fantastic, so that there'd be no point trying to compete with them, because Fender has production abilities beyond any other company, beyond Gibson. They can make the world's best guitar for 30% less than any of their competitors could ever touch, but they don't, because they can sell more guitars making them badly, and so that's what they've been doing. And then they'll just hide behind lawyers to make everyone else suck like them, I guess. Now, Fender doesn't always suck. My Eric Johnson Strat is fantastic, but that's one model, and it's pretty heavy as far as Strats go. Hey, Sergio5150. Got an AC30 custom classic head. You check the effects loop and it has revised components before they re-revise them. Good. Could I speak a little on the rear output bias and smoothing switches? Yeah, the bias changes between 50 ohm and 80 ohm. So 80 ohm is a little bit cooler. 50 ohms is actually the later circuit. The 80 ohm was like 59 to 61 was the 80 ohm, and then they changed it to 50 ohm to get a little more output out of the AC30. And it makes the output a little bit louder, a little bit more aggressive. It's subtle. You're going to have longer tube life at the 80 the more typically correct or known, more popular sound at 50. Play around with that. As to the filtering, okay, I need to make that taller. The smoothing switch is the filtering caps, whether the two filtering stages for the reservoir and screen are just 20 microfarad and 20 microfarad, or whether they're doubled to 40 microfarad and 40 microfarad. Vintage correct is 2020. You'll have a softer bass response, different harmonic content, and different distortion characteristics with 2020 at the cost of having more hum. 4040 will give you tighter lows, a little more Fender-like response overall, and will lessen the hum. Both are safe, totally matter of preference, so whichever one you like on either of those switches is fine. I'm glad that yours always has the revised before they revised the loop. And the effects loop on that amp is quite good. Even if you're not using it, though, do the way the switches work. Once a year, maybe give the switch itself and the input and output jacks for the switches a squirt of deoxit, and on the jacks put squirt some deoxit in there and put a cable in and out, in and out, in and out a few times. Yeah, Sweeney Todd, Tommy. Have they? At least they didn't have to hear country songs talk about horrible subjects and exposing kids to dark subject matter. Thank you, Symbotist. You scratch build a Princeton reverb, standard schematic, using the tank I always recommend. Cool. 100K linear pot. For me, there's way too much reverb unusable above 4 to 5. Would a log pot or J-taper pot solve this? Well, the Fenders vary a lot in the reverb level response, and it is often possible for the amp to pretty much have the normal range between, most people are going to set it between 2 and 4. Many people will never go above 3 or don't even go as high as 3 because it does start to get really a lot at 4 and above. For you, it's unusable. For other people, that's Surf City where you're talking about. But what you can do is you can change out the 100K linear taper reverb pot for an audio taper. And so what is now your 5 becomes your 8. So that gives you a lot more control, a much wider suite range of control. So yeah, try changing out the 100K linear for 100K audio, or just know that, hey, for most of the time you're going to be stuck between 1 and 4, and anything below 1 you won't hear, anything above 4 is too much. And that's how most of them work. That is the vintage experience. And thank you very much for the super chat. Hey, Brett, I'm one of the people who don't like Jesus Christ Superstar. It's better than later Weber stuff, but I find his ballad schmaltzy and his rock stuff to be lame. But hey, no one's asking my opinion of whether to put on his damn shows. And what the hell's Cats? Anyway. Hey, Mullet the Guitar Guru. TSL Marshall 122 combo question. It is getting repaired now again. Can I unplug to output tubes and keep it cool through the FX send? All right, you're wondering if you can use the amp just as a preamp? If you pull the output tubes, yeah, you can pull the output tubes and run the amp and just send the FX out to whatever you need to do. You will have slightly, well, not slightly, you have much higher preamp voltages than with output tubes, which you may prefer. You'll have a little more clean headroom. You'll have a little bit less noise. So you might love it. But yeah, if the output tubes are pulled in the TSL and you're using this, the effects loop send, so you're using as a giant preamp, that's fine. You can also pull the phase inverter tube if you wish. That'd be absolutely fine. Hey, you got a Valve Junior head cab, has a little fluttery sound with volume at 0. The flutter sound goes away halfway up, returns towards full volume. Any suggestions? Hey, GJ, it's hard to say that. Wow, GJ, 1970. Had to think about that one. I'm not sure how you're having a fluttery sound with the volume at 0, but if you're not going to hear any guitar, hopefully with the volume at 0, but you may be getting there may be a symptom of a failing ground or failing filter cap in your amp. Sometimes you'll have a problem in the ground or in the filtering that sounds okay with a volume pot halfway up or in the halfway part of its range, but at either extreme is really problematic. You would need to take your amp to a tech. The trouble with the Valve Junior is that they're so inexpensive that most techs' bench fees might exceed the resale value of the amp. See if you can find a local tech who'd take a look at it, maybe able to give you a diagnosis at least for an inexpensive price. Hey, two guitar garage. Basses seem to be very accepting of solid-state amps and DI for both stage and recording, etc. I personally stick to tube amps for both guitar and bass, but my bassist loves her solid-state head. Yes, I agree. Is there a signal or frequency reason, bass reason, the solid-state is seemingly more prevalent for bass guitar? Well, it's very simple. To have equivalent perceived volume levels, it takes more power to amplify a very low frequency than it does to amplify a higher frequency. So this 15-watt amp I'm playing through right now, more on that later, is at stage volume for most stages today, with the 15-watt amp with its mastered volume at noon. If I were to plug a bass into that amp, it would be too low for stage volume, for that stage volume, because that amp would not reproduce the low frequencies as well as it reproduces the upper frequencies. So to have the equivalent volume for a bass signal, full frequency bass, 4-string, we'll just say 4-string for simplicity's sake, where I've got amplified down to 41 hertz versus amplifying down to 82 hertz, I would need to more than double the wattage of the amp. So I would need at least 100-watt bass amp to keep up with this 15-watt tube amp. But for other stages, you'd probably want more wattage as well, because if someone's using a twin, which is 85 watts, and you need to be able to hang with that, you're going to want a 300-watt or a 500-watt bass amp. And to get 300 to 500 watts out of tubes is very expensive, generates a lot of heat, there's a lot of points of failure, versus getting there with solid state, where you can easily have 1,000 watts if you want to. It's much more economical to do it with good solid state. And most bassists want a very clean sound, as opposed to most guitars where they want a lot of grunge and character, and the signal coming out of the guitar is not what is coming out of the speaker. Whereas most bassists want to have a sound pretty much what a DI is, but they can hear it on stage, or they're going for a very specific but usually very clean sound. And so if I were to go gig with this 15-watt amp, I'd want to have the ability to turn the master volume up to 10 with this 15 1x12, and that'd be loud enough for any stage in this city for guitar. If I were going to play bass on that same stage, or I were picking out an amp for the bassist on that stage, I'd probably want like an Aguilar Tonehammer 500-watt, or at least 300-watt, with a suitable cab, maybe a 2x12 or 1x15. No tweeters, please. So yeah, you can use a tube amp for bass, but it's really hard to get the volume level where you want it. The old Fender Bassman, the AB165, 50 watts, even with a big cabinet, that's just barely loud enough for most stages at 50 watts for bass, whereas for guitar, it can be ungodly loud. So it just takes more energy to amplify a big AC waveform than a small AC waveform. big as in terms of frequency as opposed to amplitude. Plus, as Wes says here, the Tone Hammer 500 weighs less than 3 pounds and fits in a backpack. A 300-watt tube amp weighs 90 plus pounds, is huge, and fits in some, but not all, taxis. Let's see. Now is a good time to insert ads. I'll tell you when it's a good time to insert ads. Speaking of which, it is a good time to insert ads because we're going to take our first intermission. And this Saturday, I apologize, we're only going to be able to go 2 hours instead of the usual 3 because I've got something I've got to do with my wife this afternoon. So we're going to take 1 7-minute intermission, and then we'll come back and finish out the hour. I might go a little bit over just to be fair, try to get as many questions answered as possible, but we are not going to do the third hour this time. You'll get more free out of me the next time you see me. So see you guys in 7 minutes. All right, coming back from break a little bit early to give everyone as much time as possible today. Let's see, where were we? Can you pardon me. Hey, Jaguar, yes, please. Can you really hear the difference between a broken-in speaker and a brand new one? Can I or can anyone? I don't know if everyone can. I usually can. I think some speakers sound painfully bright when they're new, and they get a little bit better as they're played in. Some speakers retain that painful brightness. Some speakers change a lot. So it's not really a fixed apples to apples thing. I can usually tell if a speaker is good or not, or suitable. When we say suitable rather than good, even when it's brand new, and I know that if I am judging the criteria correctly, that what I hear as very promising and suitable when new will improve a little bit to some unknown degree with more playing time. I think one of the tricks to this is you have to have fairly extended high frequency hearing left. And an awful lot of players don't hear anything above 3K by the time they're my age. I've been very fortunate that I did not lose a lot of that frequency range when I was playing live, especially since I would always stand about 6 feet from the snare and hi-hat, because I liked having that right there, because the drummer was a much better timekeeper than I was, so I would be trusting him implicitly, and I liked hearing that right there. So I've had some very loud sources right here. Snares are freaking loud, but for some reason I do not have a lot of damage, and I don't have a lot of frequency loss compared to other people my age. I just turned 55 not long ago, and I still have up to 16K. Last time I had it measured. But there are people who don't hear that at our age. Some people just from normal aging, some people from exposure to loud sounds. So if you don't hear the high frequencies, you may not hear the difference. But yes, it is possible, and I bet our 5-year-olds can really hear the difference. And I know that my Labrador can tell when there's oscillation before my scope can tell if there's oscillation. I might have an amp that sounds a little weird to me, and then I'll get out the scope to track it down or verify that to me it just sounds a little bit weird. My dog will walk through will leave the front of the house and go. I'm like, okay, yeah, time to get the scope out. The lab is a great diagnostic tool. Did we cover Les Mis? Thank you very much, Cat's Music Journey. Well, I hate to disappoint you based on the super chat. I am not a fan of Les Mis. I find it overwrought schmaltz, but that's wholly subjective. I don't have find the same flaws with it that I do with like Phantom, but big anthemic stuff done with opera vibrato bores the hell out of me. I don't care for opera. Now, I have just said that there's something good in every genre out there, and you shouldn't dismiss genres. And when I was a music student, I studied opera, and I know an awful lot of opera and why things are, certain composers achieved amazing effects, and I can apply that if I were producing music again. I could apply those concepts. But I don't like the vocal technique in opera. To me, it strips the humanity out of things to have that vibrato and that extreme enunciation on everything. I can't stand it. Give me Stevie Wonder or Ella Fitzgerald any day. Nina Simone. Hey, Scott from Baltimore was wondering about EQ before the amp or in the effects loop, whether an EQ for home stereo would be any good. Would impedance be something to worry about? EQ for home stereo, that gets really tricky. Most home stereo equalizers are graphic equalizers. And graphic EQs introduce a lot of phase and time arrival issues and distortions that people aren't aware of. It's possible to get a very, very good one. I'm sure Dustin's got some nice ones if he's not doing it all in software these days. But most graphic EQs are popular because people understand it, because it's what you see is what you get, rather than it actually being a very good sounding implementation of an EQ. My preference would be to have a very nice stereo parametric, but you have to, if you have a parametric, you've got to take the time to really learn how to use the parametric. That said, an awful lot of good stereos over the decades just had a basic tone circuit. I cannot tell you what to do for a home stereo because I don't know all the other components of a home stereo. When I listen to my music here, I am listening. I burnt all my CDs into the computer a long time ago using lossless, and I download. When I make purchases, I purchase the lossless, and it's played back in Apple Music because it's convenient for my operating system. But I'm not doing Spotify and all that. And it's coming out of the M6 into two Yamaha HS7s, and I don't have any active EQ engaged in any of the software. And I'm hearing things pretty much as the mix engineer or the mastering engineer intended within the limits of this room. And that's what I like to hear. And in the car, I will turn up the bass and treble to offset weird acoustics of the car and road noise and stuff. But I'm not trying to make things sound awesome in the car. I'm trying to make them sound as balanced as possible. In a guitar rig, home stereo EQ in a guitar rig. Oh, okay. I would not use any EQ pedal built for a stereo system in a guitar rig. And I don't think most people need an EQ pedal. I think EQ before the amp or in the effects loop. If you're finding yourself having to add additional EQ to an amp, you have the wrong damn amp. I think if your use case is David Gilmore, where you have one EQ set to use only with one overdrive pedal to sculpt your sound for one overdrive sound, and then your other overdrive pedal has a different dedicated EQ pedal in the same loop. If you want to throw a bunch of money at it, that's fine. But in terms of, that's a very rarefied use for that kind of stuff. And I think most people don't need an EQ pedal on their board or in their effects loop. If their amp needs fixing, they've got the wrong amp. Any thoughts on a reissue 65 Princeton reverb with an intensity control that doesn't work until it hits fine? Everything else works well other than the reverb being a bit overwhelming. Hey, Surly Montanan, you may have a weak LDR. You may have a weak tube in V5. I would swap the tube in V5 first. It's also possible you've got a dirty or faulty pot. I try a different tube in V5. And if for a quick and dirty check, you can take the tube out of V1 and put it in V5, and you just want to have a normal channel for a little bit, and you go in the reverb channel. And if your tremolo improves, you had a weak tube in V5 that just wasn't driving the oscillator that much. Beyond that, you would need to take it to a tech. It'd be probably pretty simple for a tech to diagnose it, but I can't do anything more than that remotely. What I recommend is Silverface Twin if I'm mostly playing at low volume. Will I still get the Twin sound? Hey, Jaguar. You will get a version of the Twin sound. I don't know that I could recommend it if you're mostly playing at low volume. I think if you're mostly playing at low volume, you might be better off with the Deluxe Reverb, and you change out, if it's a reissued Deluxe Reverb, add the mid spot on the back, the 100K audio taper like I do in my mods, and then you can turn that thing down to like 8 o'clock and have the typical mids response out of a Twin. At low volumes, you're not going to hear a lot of the differences between a Twin and a Deluxe Reverb, other than the mids, the amount of mids in the preamp, and the speaker choice, and that depends on what speakers you have. But you can use a silver phase twin at low volume. That's not a problem. It'll still sound like a twin, but you won't be getting the benefits of having such a large, heavy, expensive, hot, heat-producing device. I played the hits of Andrew Floyd Webber on tour for 18 months, musical equivalent of flipping burgers at McDonald's. Gethsemane was always fun because of an amazing brass section. Well, I'm glad that there were moments of joy flipping those musical burgers. I don't know that any Broadway pit musician stays in love with whatever their current gig is, but I don't know. I find Weber's stuff very obvious. Even like Memories, it's Blue Moon Redux. Hey, Flesh84, what are some of the common build issues you run into with the EVH amps? Well, I don't know if you mean 5150s in general, which would include the PVs, or if you just mean specifically the EVH Fender builds. Most of the problems with the Fender builds are bad power transformers, terrible layouts, the MIDI implementation is crappy, IC filter caps that fail, just like they do in all the Fenders of the current period, and just really poor layout as far as the circuit layout goes. As far as, hey, this is noisy, this should be away from this other thing, which is also noisy. No, let's run them right next to each other so they can all be noisier. I think they're bad amps, made to a unrealistic price point. And if you wanted to sound like Edward, you get a Soldano SLO, or you get a 68 Marshall, or something like Sir. Sir's got a variant on that, and Friedman's got a variant on that. They both have a very good variant on a 68 Plexi. One of them will float your boat more than the other if you're going for the actual Van Halen 2, Van Halen 1, fair warning sounds. And if you're going for the later stuff, I guess starting, what would that be? The OU1812 in unlawful carnal knowledge era, then SLO is going to give you the real version of that sound reliably. Hey, I love running some dirt in parallel on a bass, Sergio. I mean, you're absolutely right, especially for recording. For live, it becomes a little problematic. But you could have a little 20 or 50 watt tube amp head for the upper mids and highs of your biamped rig for bass, and then just have a little solid state 500 watter for all the lows, just separate cabs and all that. You can do all kinds of stuff, though. These days, the stuff you can do, aside from the digital modeling, the stuff that you can do with a Sans amp is pretty amazing. I've always found that Getty's had a pretty good live sound the past 15, 20 years. He's been using the Sans amp stuff. But of course, that's a very specific bass sound. And then here's what Dustin's talking about, doing that in the PA as opposed to on the stage. Do any current production 5AR4 GZ34 stand out as better than the rest? No. The two that I recommend to most people are the JJ and the Sovtek. They usually work fine. They're the least expensive options, and I've had no more or no less failures with those than with like the Tung Sol or the Mullard reissues, which seem to be no better, but certainly not going to give you any different performance or voltages in the amp, but that you spend a lot more for no more promise of reliability. If I have a suspect tube like a current production GZ34, if I can get it for $22 versus $44, I'll get it for $22. Buy from a good vendor that has a good 90-day policy or 30-day policy or whatever, standing behind their product. That's the best you can do. I'm sorry you got the tinnitus. Tinnitus is no fun. I'm glad that it hasn't given you big notches yet. And Dustin's doing live sound at a very high level. And like I said, parametrics are the way to go if you know how to use them. Now, I'm sure he's got or has spent a lot of time with the big computer-controlled graphic EQs to ring out PAs and stuff, but that may all be done on iPads these days. I don't know, but I find that the quality of those graphic EQs is a lot different than what you might find in even like a Rain device that's typically sold for a guitar rack setup, let alone the crap sold for home stereo use. The loudness button, yeah, the loudness button, Fletcher Munson Cure. Hey, Gerbin Louis. I'm sorry if I butcher that. I always mean to get everyone's name right. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky without capitalization for me to know where one name stops and the next one begins. There's a 78 AC36 with blackbacks being sold locally for $550. Looks good, hasn't been used in 27 years. Quality amp will get me the JMI sound we'll have to look out for. Thanks, man. 78 AC30 is nowhere near the JMI. It's got weird design and build quality issues. And if it's not been used in 27 years, it probably needs $400 to $500 worth of work to be made safe. So I would say pass unless you've got deep pockets and like restoration projects. I think you'd be better off buying a used AC15 custom for the same $550 and get an amp that works and will work every time. There's no magic to the 78s. Very much the opposite. Carvin Vintage 16 amp. Do I have an opinion on those? One for sale locally, but I'm just going to get the V30 that's in it. Is an amp worth having? If it works and you like the sound, I guess technically it's worth having. It's not something that I would recommend seeking out. And, it's not, Carvins typically aren't worth the price of repair, and they're built so cheaply that the odds are it would need repair. I don't know what the sale price is, but if it's not emitting smoke or massive hums and you like the sound and it fits your budget without you having to make any sacrifice whatsoever. If it's something you can just pick up without thinking about it, like, hey, I could have gone to Applebee's, but instead I got this amp, that's fine. Get it. But if it's like, hey, I could have paid my utility bill, but I got this instead, that's a bad idea. Set my 9-year-old dad with a dual 31-band EQ, so he dialed in plus 12 dB for everything above 5K, where his hearing loss is severe. Poor mom can't stay in the room. Your mother deserves better than for you to give that to your dad, Ted. I'm glad your dad is able to hear that. My mom has got severe hearing loss and treble frequencies, and I have tried and tried. I can't even get her to wear the AirPods today that do fake hearing aid. She won't wear anything in her ears, let alone consider getting actual hearing aids. And so we go to her house, and her television is just screaming at us, and she doesn't think it's loud at all. She'll call me, and I can't hear her because she's got the TV up so loud in the background. It drives me nuts. I mean, I'll go to her house, and from the minute I walk in the door, I'm being shouted at by that damn television, and she doesn't even hear that it's on if she's not in the room with it. And I can imagine it, but I can't really conceive of what life is like that. It's one of the reasons I've got a 15-watt amp right here at half volume. Speaking of 15-watt amps, I was waiting till we were well in the chat, and pretty much everyone who's going to be here is here. This is the Sonic Audio Excalibur 15 with a matching 1x12 cab in an immaculate shape. And the current owner loves this amp. He's the original owner of the guy I built this for. But given where he's playing these days and his ability to pick things up, it is too much for him now. It's that 67 Vibro Champ that came in the other day is also his. He's going towards the Vibro Champ end of things, and he wants to sell this pretty much as new, 100% working beautifully, Excalibur 15. And I get asked about this all the time, and I think this is pretty much the best chance anyone's going to get one. Now, I am staying out of the financial aspect of it. I'm not going to make any money off the sale of this, and I'm not going to get into pricing. But if anyone is interested in buying this amp, and that's on the EF86 channel with a volume just below 9 o'clock, the tight switch down, so full lows, the master tone at about 2 o'clock, and the master volume at noon. That is very, very loud stage volume Deluxe Reverb right there. No bells and whistles, no bells and whistles necessary. Anyway, his name is Hal Hawkins. He's a really good guy. He's been on the channel quite a bit. And if you are very seriously interested, email me with subject matter, Excalibur or Hal's amp, and I'll put you in touch with Hal. It's a very, very good amp, and I wish I could keep it for myself, but I'm always surrounded by amps, so it would just be taking up space. It is so pretty. I have plenty of videos up. It's the thing in my Sonic Audio. If you go to the Sonic Audio on YouTube, it's at the top. It is gorgeous. It is matchy-matchy, and it sounds about as good as it's possible for an amp to sound, if I can be the person who says that. If, you know, a very loud 15 watts is your thing, it's got the WGS black and blue 15 watt Alnico speaker, matching 1x12 cab, and it just looks the tits. So if anyone is interested, this is your chance. Email me, Hal's amp or Excalibur, and I'll get you in touch with Hal. And I didn't want to put this at the top of the stream because then I'd have drive-by people asking questions about that. And if I need to do a video on the channel later, I will. But this is, for the regular guys who are here a lot, who've expressed a lot of interest in getting one, this is your ability to get dibs on one. And as to the price, that's between you and Hal. I'm staying out of it. Hey, Gervin. Do two 1x12 cabs with the same speakers and total cabinet volume and depth sound the same as a 2x12 cab? When close, I'd have two 1x12 cabs and play around with different combinations of speakers. No, they won't sound the same, because when you have two speakers in the same space, there's some interaction. But if you were to magically have all the dimensions be the same and each 1x12 have the same volume available to each speaker, as each speaker gets in a 2x12, it'd be fairly close. The advantage of the 2x12 is you can move them farther apart. Two 1x12s, you can move them farther apart on stage if you're doing any stereo stuff. Or you could have two separate speakers with two separate mics with less interaction in terms of what the mic hears. For most players, though, a 2x12 is going to be more convenient, less one trip to the car versus possibly two, and it takes up a little less space on stage. They're not exactly the same, but for most uses, they're close enough. How does the new Soldano SLO compare to the original? I don't know, Victor. I've not tried any of the stuff that's coming out now. If you mean like the BAD stuff, I don't know if BAD is making SLOs or just the lower wattage stuff. Hey, Rashad77, 76 twin reverb with tremolo issues. lag between striking strings and hearing modulated sound when intensity pot is increased. LDR drifted to 10 meg replace. Try this R. LDR and drifted 10 meg resistor replaced. V5 is good. Any ideas? Absolutely. You've got a 25 or 22 microfarad cap across the 100K cathode on V5B. Change that to a 4.7 microfarad, and then all of a sudden, when there won't be that lag between when you turn the speed knob and or the intensity and hearing the effect. Right now, because you've got a 22 or 25 microfarad cap there, whenever you make a change, it takes a while for that voltage to dissipate, so changes aren't very instant. They're always a little bit behind. Change that to a smaller value cap, 4.7 microfarad will do the trick. What would I personally use in a 2x12 extension cab for my Deluxe Reverb for more stage volume? I probably do what I do all the time when you hear, if you're hearing an amp on my channel that's not being run through specifically run through its own speaker, either in a combo or a Marshall, whatever. You're hearing my shop cab, which is a 2x12, and I've got a WGS ET65 on one side and a Veteran 30 on the other, and I think that is one particular desert island setup. And I happen to know that Deluxe Reverbs sound fantastic through that combination. Hey, did Amnesia bought the TAD cap kit for your Deluxe Reverb reissue? Is it difficult to add the mids pot? Worth it to someone like me with multiple amps? It's not difficult if you know how to do it and you have the tools. What I do is I often have to use some Goo Gone to get off a little inspection sticker. It's this little hologram thing off the back panel. I put it in between V3 and V4. So I remove that sticker right there, and then I make a center point and then go down from center by about 1/8 of an inch so that I know the pot will fit. I'll make sure, you can put the pot there, mark a center point where I want the pot to go with a marker. Then I'll use a hammer tap, what do you call it? The little pointy thing you hit with a hammer. It just makes a little indentation in the metal. I can't believe I'm forgetting the word. Do that so I get a little bit of a divot around that mark. Center punch. Thank you very much, Dustin. And then I follow that up with a I think it's a 1/32, it might be a 1/16 drill bit through that. Then I work my way up through the drill bits till I get to an eighth of an inch. Once I'm at 1/8 of an inch, I can move to my step bit. Then I can open that up to 3/8 of an inch. And I make sure I don't have any metal shavings inside the amp. And I make sure that if I need to, I use a deburring tool to make that hole nice and neat. And then I have a 3/8 inch hole in the back where the CTS or alpha pot goes. I put a 100K audio taper pot there. Then on the reverb channel, I remove the 6.8K mids resistor from the board, which is over by the bass pot. And I run a shielded wire from the point where the 6.8K resistor used to connect to lug 3 of the bass pot and to ground. So the center conductor is going to where the 6.8K used to connect. The shield is at ground, run that to the pot and to the correct lugs. And then I've got a 100K audio taper pot where there used to be a 6.8K resistor. And that, when it's at noon, it's at 10K. So that's a twin on 10. When it's at 10 o'clock, that's about 7K, like the stock Deluxe Reverb. Below that, you're in twin reverb levels. Is it worth it? I don't know. If you got a lot of amps and you're fine with the sound of the stock amp, go for it. If you turn it above noon, you get into more breakup territory. I find it useful for Deluxe Reverb reissue. It makes the amp more versatile. You can make it sound like a small twin. You can make it sound like a little more tweedy, Marshally. But there's nothing wrong with a stock amp, certainly. It's just a nice to have, and if you want it to sound stock, you put it about 10 o'clock and it sounds stock. But that's the way I do it. Oh, and I always use a chicken head knob so that when you reach around the back of the amp, you can feel where it is. You don't have to look at it. If you use a knob like that matches the front of the amp, it's prettier, but you can't feel where it is. You have to look at it. Gooden uses a spring-loaded center punch. Well, Gooden's fancy. I can't help you with earbuds. All earbuds suck. This sound coming out of them is not very good. This is one pair of my earbuds. These are my Beyer Dynamic earbuds. They sound really good. I've also got some Sony MDR 7506 earbuds over there. I've tried to have in-ears that I like the sound of. It's not even a matter of the comfort so much as they don't sound that great. I did have some relatively expensive in-ear things that weren't very comfortable. They sounded pretty good, but they weren't very comfortable. I can't remember what they were, something 10 something. I just like headphones better. Someone else have better suggestions for you. That's what I suspected having. Whenever I go to a live venue where there's any serious PA, I'm always keeping an eye on what's happening at the mix position, and I also try to keep an eye out when I can get a glimpse of what's happening at any stage mix position. And I've seen more and more just on an iPad, which makes sense to me. I could technically run all the audio stuff from an iPad using Logic, and I've got a Stream Deck, which I can't quite show you because the cable's not quite long enough, but there it is, right there. That's how I switch scenes and all that stuff here. In a sane world, it could be shipped to the UK, but I think that is not the world we're in now, sadly, Chris. Oh, Jesus, Victor, I'm so sorry. Oh, man. How do you say shit in Hawaiian? I know how to say aloha and mahalo, thanks to you, and Stitch, but I'm so sorry to hear that, man. Recently acquired an SLO 100 and find it's a tad bright. Anything you can do? Well, it's got a bright cap you can remove, but I don't know how you're setting the gain. It gets smoother as you turn it up, but that brightness is part of the sound because it accentuates the things which sound bright when clean become exciting when overdriven. It's a very particular amp, and it's not for everyone. But if you think the SLO 100 is bright, man, a 5150. Hey, the Valvinist. Greetings from Cambridge. Got a Laney VC15 as a practice amp. When I switch it off, I tend to get a loud bang, which sounds like the amp going to max volume for a second. Any clues? I'm not that familiar with the VC15. Does it have two channels by any chance? Sometimes you'll have a channel switching amp. At the moment of powering it off, it switches to the other channel, but doesn't switch the master volume, a channel master in time, and you can get that sound. I'd have to be more familiar with the VC15. Let me take a look at that model for you, so I have some chance of giving you an informed answer. Let's see. Here's the manual. Let's see what all is going on with this amp. Okay, so you got clean volume drive and drive volume. So yeah, it's got two channels. If you're using the clean channel and you're powering it off and you get that thud, it's possible that the moment that you're switching, it's going to the drive channel and your drive, but it's not is not having time to kick in the drive master volume or something. So I would, if you're using the clean channel, you're getting the thud, try putting the drive volume at 0 if you're not using that channel when you power it off, just for troubleshooting right now. Or if you're using the dirty channel and you're getting that pop, turn the clean volume off to 0 before you power the amp off. That might be the issue. Beyond that, it would depend on how any muting is done in that amp. It's possible that something in the mute circuit is not being triggered properly during the power off sequence, because voltage may leave a low voltage supply faster than it leaves the output, the main filter cap. So the amp is still producing sound even though there's no more low voltage present. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but if necessary, just get in the habit of rolling both volumes off before you power the amp off. That might help, because usually the volume pot will be a hardwired thing, not a relay thing. But I don't know without having the amp in front of me. If it makes serious bangs, despite whatever configuration of volume you do, get in touch with Chris at Rift Amps in the UK, and he'll be able to troubleshoot that very easily for you. I don't think he's that far from Cambridge. From an American's perspective, nothing in England is that far from anything else in England. But I know that you guys have a different view of driving 300 miles than we do. So, but he's certainly less than 300 miles from you. I don't think he's that far from Cambridge, and he does excellent work. Hey, Sire, have I ever heard of or have an opinion on the twin half power mod? Thinking of doing it and getting some lightweight neo creambacks just to get the amp to work a bit and make it lighter. I assume you mean pulling a pair of output tubes and changing the speaker impedance to offset that. I don't think that's a good idea. I think, honestly, if the twin is too loud for you, get a different amp, or have a good master volume installed, so you're not going to have to deal with wildly changing voltages as you use 4 or 2 tubes, and you don't have to keep track of which impedance trick to do for the speakers and all that. If you want to put some neo creambacks in a twin, that'll reduce the weight quite a bit, but I would go with a master volume versus any tube pulling tricks, certainly versus doing any half power switch, because those never sound right. Or do what people have always done. You have a twin or a super for big stages. You have a Deluxe Reverb for regular stages, and you might have a Princeton or a Champ for very small stages. The right tool for the job, and whichever tool is the right tool for the job is up to you. Hey, G. Denson. Just had to pry 2 C12Ks out of a twin reverb reissue due to the usual speakers on wet paint from factory. Yeah, I hate when they do that, man. It's always the case. I wouldn't mind saving them, but gaskets are toast and must be replaced. Any tips? Well, 2 things. You can get replacement gaskets from Celestion. You can peel the remnants off the old ones and then glue new gaskets on. And because the nature of a gasket going to a baffle, if you have a little bit of the old gasket left and you put the new gaskets on, it'll compress, it'll still work. Second thought, C12Ks sound like ass, so I wouldn't worry about reusing them myself. Some people like the sound of ass. That's a different channel, a different YouTube rating, but I don't think the C12K is worth worrying about. But hey, you may need to have them on hand for someone who just absolutely needs a new speaker but cannot afford a new speaker, and you just happen to have some C12Ks that aren't worth but $20 each. Here you go. So you can get some gaskets. I think there are even third-party Celestion replacement gaskets. It's very simple to do. Just get as much of the old one off as possible, and then put the new ones on with some. And it usually comes with double-sided. Stick them, and there you go. Okay, Rashad, regarding my lagging tremolo, I already replaced the OEM Mallory cap with a 4.7 microfarad 50 volt that measures fine. Any other suggestions? Well, what was interesting to me was you said it lagged when you turned up the intensity versus the speed. At first I thought you meant intensity instead of speed, and you just mistyped. Because the description, the symptom that you gave would make sense if it is following the intensity changes. Sorry, the speed changes, not the intensity changes. The intensity change is just direct. It's just how close to ground the LDR portion of the roach is as it is exposed to light, and so there shouldn't be any delay at all between turning the intensity up and hearing it. I really can't imagine that if the tremolo circuit is working and the LDR is going between, like, let's say the nominal 0 ohms and 10,000 ohms, 10 meg ohms, 10 million, 10 meg and 0. That's the perfect ideal range of an LDR. Then your signal should not be having any lag affected by the turning of the intensity pot. It's really strange. I can't tell you any other than that. I really thought that you had mistyped speed pot, because the speed lag is very common, but you already did the right fix for that. I would have to have your amp on the bench in front of me. I'm sorry. Is it common to install a headphone jack in some hand-wired or vintage amps? No. It's very uncommon, and it's a very bad idea. Headphones have very different impedances and need very, very different levels than anything in a guitar amp, and it is not something that you'd want to do either. You don't want to have anything in your amp that could potentially blow out your ears through headphones. You need to have a circuit with protection on protection on protection. It's not worth it, because you can get a solid state amp if you need headphone jacks. There's a reason that we have inexpensive digital modeling today. You could probably get for practice, I mean, seriously, people are way too snobbish about this. You could probably pick up an original Pod or Pod Pro for $50. It still works. Dial up a twin reverb sound or a basic Marshall sound with delay, headphones, go to town, play it till it dies, or you can get one of those little, what is it, the thing that Vox has that plugs right into the headphone jack, play that till it dies, which would be as little as 15 minutes. It's poorly built as those things were. But I mean, there's so many good options where you cannot damage your hearing. Don't modify an actual tube amp to have that stuff. Hey, Sergio 5150, he's got a 76 Super 6 twin, modded long ago, master remove, variable negative feedback. Low end is flubby and comes in at 2. I don't go above 3. Anything you do, the low part of the tone stack. Well, two things. Reconnect the negative feedback. Don't have variable negative feedback. Make sure you have the standard twin reverb feedback. Second of all, on a 76 twin, they changed the input cap of the phase inverter from a 1 nanofarad to a 10 nanofarad, and they changed the grid leaks of the phase inverter from 1 meg to 330K. And because the ratio has changed between 1 nanofarad, 1 meg to 10 nanofarad, 330K, it has a lot more low end than it should have compared to the better sounding version of the same circuit from pre-68. So you change the input cap of the phase inverter from 10 nanofarad to 3 or 3.3 nanofarad, and you're going to have a lot better low-end response. Second of all, sometimes in the late 70s, the taper of the bass pot would be wrong. They put in a linear taper bass pot as opposed to audio taper. So verify that you have audio taper versus linear taper. It's really easy to measure that in a twin. You just measure between lugs 1 and 2. So the left one to the middle one. And with the knob set to 5.5, if it's an audio taper, you should measure about 20-something K. If it's a linear, 40-something K. If it's a linear taper, it'll measure 120-something K. If you have a linear taper pot and that 10 nanofarad, you're going to have a really woofy low end. Hey, Randy Steffs. I talked about the silly, expensive Strat earlier. That sure would fund a lot of school and children's musician group, buy a lot of violins and trumpets for kids and other things that kids need to learn music these days. Versus one guy pretending he's David Gilmore. Meanwhile, David Gilmore could walk into any music store, grab any basically playable Strat, and sound just like himself. Do I think there's a quality difference between the DSL 20 head versus the JCM Studio 800 head? Very slightly in the Studio 800 favor, but they're not. Neither of them are great. Neither of them are things I would spend money on. The DSL 20 has got the world's coldest bias, weakest, underused EL34s, and the Studio 800 is at least got more of a serious output section, but neither of them are built very well. Let's see. Bella reverbs are great if you want a very clean. People consider the ultimate pedal platform sound. If you like a very clean amp, it'd be great. It's not versatile in and of itself. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a very good, clean bass line. Think of it as being a 1x12 twin. This kind of have a same use in a band as a twin reverb, while taking up less space and being less heavy, and putting out less wattage. Not being as loud, but being more than loud enough for any stages used today. Hey, Alex 2112. Hey, man, did you see two things this past week? First of all, the Terry Brown remix of Grace Under Pressure was released, which is really great to listen to. Much more guitar and drum forward. The synths are there, but they're dialed back. And yesterday, Rush released the full Grace Under Pressure tour concert, the full one, not the snippets we got on VHS for the past 40 years. So the full show and remastered, all the footage looks great. Still a little bit soft, everything was very soft focus and glowy because the way that thing was filmed. And there's some footage from the front that was missing. So there's a couple of sections where what they're showing Alex, but what his hands are doing is not what you're hearing because they didn't have good footage of that section. But the audio is all replaced, and 95% of it is exactly what what you see is what you hear. I think that was one of the best performances, and it's really nice to see that in high definition for the first time. Hey, Greg from St. Louis. Right back at you down here in Memphis. My VC15 is through hole and was built on a Monday after a wild drunken weekend. Had to desolder and resolder every solder joint on the PCB. Secondary fault was an open circuit wiping on the treble pot. Yeah, Laney's are fun. I'm not a huge fan of Laney's, but I understand that people are, and I hope that they get better. And I've actually played some that were absolutely just fine, just fine. Thank you very much. But they seem to have different phases that they go through. Hey, Skyra Quit TV. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but that's nice of you to go help your neighbor. That's what we do. I'm really sorry to hear that, Victor. That sucks. Ballinator did a recent video about the history of Allen wrenches. Wow. Okay. If anyone ever calls me a geek again, I'll say, hey, no. Let me tell you about geeks. Hey, Brad, you're here just in time for me to wrap it up pretty much. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do this thing here. I forgot what scene I was on. I forgot that I was ending the chat early, so I thought I was going to this screen, but went to the intermission by mistake. I actually caught up on all the questions today. Either I'm getting better or people are tuning me out more. Spruce Creek Craters, Mercury output transformers for AC30s. What are the basic difference between the Woden, Haddon, Albion, and radio spares that make me choose one or the others? Thank you. Radio spares is real interesting because you only have 16 ohm output, and it's really a very different primary loading. You can get. I'm only doing 2 hours this time, Brad. I've got something I've got to do this afternoon with Nikki. So the radio spares is if I were going for a real aggressive kind of, put it this way, if a guy said, "Hey, I'm really into the Yardbirds," I'd be like, "All right, let's talk radio spares and what they can give you." It's a little more aggressive, little more a different character, a little less headroom. Haddon and Woden sound almost identical. Albion is not too different from that. Much is made of the differences in the transformers that Vox JMI used. I think a lot of people focus on the transformers being different when they don't pay attention to, hey, this amp had Wodens and has a certain sound, but it also had, say, Wema Gold Tropifoils versus the Brown Hunts caps versus the earlier brown Wemas you might find in one of the ones with Albion. So apples to apples can be tricky with, why is it over here? Apples to apples can be tricky with, I keep making this thing better and it keeps making it worse. Anyway, transformers. I've got a video up showing, I believe I was switching between a Woden and a Haddon. It might have been a Woden and an Albion output transformer on a 63 AC30. So here's the same guitar, same amp, same settings, same speaker. Here's with the Woden, here's with the Haddon, or here's with the Woden, here's the Albion. They were different. They were subtly different. They weren't like, oh my God, that's the one, or that's got the qualities, that's clearly the Haddon. They're all of them are fine choices. Realistically, when I order a transformer for a client, back when I was using the Mercuries a lot, I would almost always want to use the Haddons, for the simple reason that their Woden is so accurate that the primaries on their Woden are the actual windings of the transformer. So you have pretty thick copper wire coming out that's covered in an enamel, and then that's all put in this really heavy protective layer of a sheath. And to solder that, you would have to scrape or burn the enamel coating off the copper to expose the copper, and then twist them together to make a point. Whereas the Haddon was built the way Haddons used to be built, where they would have the inner windings terminated inside the transformer bell cover, and then regular wires brought out to the rest of the world. Much, much easier to incorporate into an amp. Still sound great. It'd be blind luck as to whether someone could hear which one was which. Or guess. If you had 5 Wodens and 5 Haddons and otherwise identical amps, it'd be pretty tough to reliably pick them out from each other. They all would sound much better than the usually put in a custom classic, much better than the stock transformers there. All right, so I think we're going to wrap it up. I do have a date. We've got a beautiful set of gardens here at the Dixon Gallery here, a local museum which has beautiful gardens, and it is that time of spring when everything is lush, and Nikki wants to go see all that stuff, and I want to see how this sees all that stuff. And so, but if I do another hour of this, then we don't have as much sunlight, and I will be back with you guys. Yeah. The Litz wire is not fun to work with. Anyway, thank you very much for being here. I'm sorry that I didn't get to do it last Saturday. I'm sorry that I missed you, Brad. And give me a shout when you get a chance, Brad, when you feel like it. And I'll talk to you guys later. And remember, if you're interested in buying Hal's Excalibur. Shoot me an email. I'll get you in touch with Hal. It would be a fun thing to have. See ya.